succeed when stones are present in the gallbladder. Okay. Okay. So today discussing. Okay. So now I'll start the class. Today we'll be discussing investigations and management of obstructive jaundice. Okay. I don't have much to cover in this class, so I'll be moving slowly. So if you want, so you can take notes, and I'll post my notes also. If you want me to repeat something, you can ask me to repeat. Okay. All right. So we discussed different causes of obstructive jaundice last class. Like it could be due to stones obstructing the bile duct. It can be due to carcinoma head of pancreas. It can be due to periampullary carcinoma, gallbladder carcinoma. Okay, and we saw different symptoms such as jaundice, abdominal pain, pale colored stools, dark colored urine. All right. So what do you guys think? What are the investigations that you would do on a patient if you think a patient has obstructive jaundice? What are the blood tests that you do? What are the imagings you'll do? What do you guys think? Any guesses? Yes, we'll check for serum bilirubin. Um, Mostly we'll do LFTs. What pattern will you expect in LFTs? What all will you see? Which all enzymes of LFTs will be elevated? Yes, there'll be increased ALT, but what is more specific? Yes, for obstructive jaundice, alkaline phosphatase and GGT, gamma glutyl transferase, they will be elevated. Alkaline phosphatase will be more than 10 times the normal limit. Okay, that is strongly suggestive of obstruction. And if GGT is simultaneously elevated, um, it is also strongly suggestive of obstruction. So under investigations, under blood investigations, the first thing is serum bilirubin. Okay, and mostly the direct bilirubin will be more elevated. Okay. Secondly, liver function test. In liver function test, the first thing is alkaline phosphatase. It will be elevated. It will be more than 10 times the normal limit. And there'll be simultaneous elevation of GGT. Okay, gamma glutamyl transferase, GGT. Okay. Then you check ALT, AST if there is hepatic failure, like if the liver is also damaged because of the obstructive jaundice or there's hepatic injury, ALT, AST will be elevated. And then we also check serum total proteins, albumin. Okay, that'll be low. You check coagulation profile, PT-INR. Okay, so these are the things that you check under blood: bilirubin, liver function test, ALT, AST, ALP, GGT, and PT-INR, coagulation profile. All right, those are the investigations. Okay. Radiological investigations. So, what is the first most basic radiological investigations that we'll do? USG. Yes, we'll do USG abdomen. And USG abdomen is very important in obstructive jaundice because when you do a USG abdomen, what is that one? There is this one finding that you'll see in USG abdomen, and you will know that this patient has to be admitted in surgery because this jaundice is obstructive jaundice. Okay, so that finding is dilatation of biliary radicals. Okay, so if there is dilatation of biliary radicals, that means this patient has obstructive jaundice. So that means this patient has to be admitted to surgery. There's a surgery patient. Okay. Um, Let me. Okay, so what other findings can you see in? So in Viva, they will ask you, but if you say USG abdomen, they will ask you what all do you want to see in USG abdomen? What are findings that you will look for in USG abdomen in a case of obstructive jaundice? Okay, write down. The first one is primary tumor. Okay, so if you think it's because of malignancy, you might be able to visualize if it's big enough. You might be. The second thing is intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. Intrahepatic or just extrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. Either thing you can see. Yeah, any pancreatic mass you'll be able to see. So first is any mass. Second one is intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. Third is any stones in the gallbladder, any calculi, or in the CBD stones. Okay, or if the gallbladder is enlarged, that you'll be able to see. Fourth is free fluid. If it's due to malignancy and there is malignant ascites, you'll be able to see the free fluid. Fifth is lymph, be able to see lymph nodes. And sixth is any abdominal deposits are there because of metastasis, you'll be able to see that. So first is the primary mass. Second is intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. Third is gallbladder. Fourth is free fluid. Fifth is lymph nodes. And sixth is abdominal deposits. So if they ask you in Viva, what all findings are you looking for in USG abdomen? You have to say all these, okay? Okay. So when do we say that there is biliary radical dilatation? How much should it be dilated? Is asked sometimes that also in Viva. So for extrahepatic ducts, it should be more than 6 millimeters. Okay, more than 6 millimeters dilatation will be biliary radical dilatation. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just put up some images for you guys to see. Hi. Intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation, which you'll be seeing in USG abdomen. Okay. Then this is how gallbladder stones calculi might look in obstructive jaundice. You can confirm that it's a calculi if it has a posterior acoustic shadow and if it moves as you move the patient. Okay, with movement, if it moves, it's more likely to be a calculi or got polyp. Okay, now I will put something up. Yeah, double duck sign. I was going to put that 1 second. Copy. So, what is this? What is double duck sign? What does it mean? What is this image showing? I think VCV can tell us. This is CT scan though, it's not an ultrasound. Yeah, so if the common bile duct and the pancreatic duct are dilated simultaneously because of the obstruction, it's called double duct sign. So you can see two ducts, both of them are dilated. The DP is the pancreatic duct and the DC is the bile duct. And so that is double duct sign. Where is it commonly seen? V is the portal vein, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So what is the most likely diagnosis if you see double duct sign? PCV? No. Yeah, it's head of pancreas carcinoma. Okay, pancreatic is most commonly seen in pancreatic carcinoma. Okay. So that is done. Okay, so what other investigations is, so if you're not able to, other than USG, if you're suspecting malignancy, it's good to do CT scan. Okay, so if you do CT scan, it is more specific in detecting the level at which the obstruction is present and the cause of the obstruction. Okay, and it is more helpful in carcinoma, likely to pick up carcinoma head of pancreas, CT scan. All right, yeah, and MRCP, ERCP. So what is MRCP and ERCP? So ERCP is endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, I think. Yeah, endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. I'll explain what that is. Yeah, okay. And the same thing, MRCP is magnetic RCP. Okay, so first we do abdominal ultrasound. Okay, and then based on what we're suspecting and based on what it is. Okay, now I'll just tell a general outline of all the investigations we're doing, and then I'll go in specifics to what we do for each case. Okay, so CT scan we do if you're suspecting carcinoma and if you want to look at what is the growth, how much has it metastasized, all that thing. Is it operable? For that, we all do CT scan. If you're suspecting a stone, if you're suspecting stones in the bile duct as the cause of obstructive jaundice, you can do MRCP first to image the stone, and then you can do ERCP. So ERCP is both diagnostic and therapeutic. So while doing ERCP, you can also remove the stone. Okay. Then if you don't find anything on USG, CT scan, MRCP, ERCP, you can do endoscopic ultrasound. Okay. Endoscopic ultrasound is best to diagnose stuff which is with any mass or any pathology which is in the lower bile duct. Okay. Whereas MRCP is good for higher up. Okay. Okay. Then another investigation which is invasive you do if you're suspecting a if you're suspecting a cancer, you can do diagnostic laparoscopy or staging laparoscopy to see how much the tumor has spread and what can be the further management. Will you resect? Will you resect like simultaneously if you will do any palliative or curative surgery? Okay, so in under imaging you have ultrasound, CT scan, MRCP, and endoscopic ultrasound. Then under invasive investigations, you have ERCP and diagnostic laparoscopy or staging laparoscopy. Okay. Now I'll explain what is ERCP, MRCP. So firstly, ERCP. Okay. So what you do in ERCP is basically you put an endoscope through the mouth, okay, and into the GI tract, and then you inject contrast into the biliary system, okay, into the bile ducts, the gallbladder, and then you take an X-ray to visualize what's happening over there. Okay, so through ERCP, you can see what all stones are there, and you can also remove the stones while you're doing the endoscopy. Okay. Anybody has any doubts, they can post. All right, I'll just put a big. Normal ERCP will look like. Okay, there's an endoscope going, you put in the contrast, okay, and you can see the whole biliary tree, bile system in the liver, and you can see some of the contrast going into the gallbladder. Okay, so this is the normal normal ERCP looks like. Then oh shit, the same question. Sorry. I'm not sure what dye is used. Some contrast is used. Yeah. You can see some pathology. So this is the endoscope coming in. You can see some bile duct dilatation over here, and then you can see filling defects over here in the gallstones, in the gallbladder, so which is probably gallstones. Okay, so this is how ERCP looks like in gallstones. Okay, are people understanding? Okay. So for ERCP, when you ask ERCP, the examiner might ask you some questions about ERCP. So they'll ask you what are the complications of ERCP. Okay, so I want you guys to write this down. What is the one of the most common complications of ERCP is acute pancreatitis. Yes, pancreatitis. Okay. The second one is duodenal perforation. Duodenal perforation. Okay. Third one is hemorrhage. Okay, hemorrhage. Okay. Fourth one is infarction, and fifth one is stent migration. Okay. Acute pancreatitis, duodenal perforation, hemorrhage, infarction, and stent migration. Five common complications. All right. Yeah. Okay, those five. Then and then what are the other uses of ERCP? Okay, so it can be used first for the diagnosis of common bile stones, which is not commonly used, and at the same time you can also do removing the stone. And how do you remove the stone? Procedures called endoscopic basketing and stone removal. Okay, stone retrieval. Yeah, it can also used for brush cytology. It can be used for biopsy, bile drainage, endoscopic stenting, yes. Okay, for inoperable tumors, when we can't operate it and we want to relieve the jaundice, we can use ERCP to do stenting. And if there is any sphincter of Oddi dysfunction, we can use ERCP to do sphincterotomy. All right. So we use it for stenting, for diagnosing and removing bile stones, for brush cytology biopsy, for sphincter of Oddi dysfunction. Okay. That if you don't see anything in MRC, okay. And for MRCP is basically ERCP, but it's like MRI, okay, instead of X-ray. And it's mostly used for tumors that are high up in the bile system, okay, where where it might not be easily visualized through injection of dye through the endoscope. Okay, so this it's done through the same procedure. Like the procedure of MRCP is the same. You take the patient to an MRI machine and you inject contrast. And yeah, what is this diagnosis? We had a picture of this in the last class while we were discussing what was that law? Cossevier's law. Okay, what is this? What do you guys see here? What is the diagnosis? It's an MRCP image. This diagnosis does not follow Cossevier's law. Yeah, but where? What is this? It's a very specific thing. It is a tumor and it's obstructing somewhere at the bifurcation of the bile ducts. Yeah, it's a Klatskin tumor. Okay. Yes. It's obstructing the bifurcation of the hepatic ducts, right hepatic, left hepatic. It's a Klatskin tumor. It does not obey Cossevier's law. So it is a malignancy, but the gallbladder won't be palpable. Okay. Then the next one. This one, Halu. This one is a tumor that is obstructing the cystic duct and the CBD. Okay. So this also is an exception to Cossevier's law. It's stone, but a gallbladder might be palpable if mucocele is developed. Okay. Yes, double impacted stone. Mhm. Yeah. So if you're not able to yeah, so if you're not able to see any finding further, you can also do a percutaneous transhepatic cholangiogram. Percutaneous transhepatic cholangiogram. Okay. Cholangiogram. This is mostly also used to diagnose pathologies that are higher level above the cystic duct. Okay. Percutaneous. Yeah, I know the name is kind of long, but it is what it is. Surgery. Okay. I mean, we haven't got to treatment. Okay. When you go to treatment, it becomes more confusing. Okay. So that is mostly it about like the broad overview of the investigations. Okay. So we have bile, serum bilirubin levels, liver function test, coagulation profile, ultrasound abdomen, CT, ERCP, MRCP, endoscopic ultrasound, and percutaneous transhepatic cholangiogram. That is in broad what we do. Okay. Now, coming to what are the pre-operative investigations that we'll do? Okay. What is the pre-operative preparation that we'll do in a case of obstructive jaundice? Okay. So mostly people with obstructive jaundice, their PTINR will be elevated. Okay, so it might either be because of obstructive jaundice, they're not able to absorb. Why do you guys think PTINR will be elevated in obstructive jaundice? Two possible reasons. Yeah, we give vitamin K, but what if it doesn't correct through vitamin K? Why would it not correct through vitamin K? Yeah, but why does it happen? Yeah, okay. So basically, because of the obstructive jaundice, we're not able to absorb fat vitamins. Yeah, we're not able to absorb phytovitamins. So there's deficiency of ADEK. And because there's deficiency of vitamin K, we're not able to synthesize the factors to 7, 9, 10. And because of that, PTINR may be elevated. So for that, under pre-op investigations, okay, pre-op preparation, we have to give injection vitamin K, IM 10 milligram for 5 days, okay, to replenish the vitamin K. But suppose we're giving this injection vitamin K, IM 10 milligram for 5 days, not improving. So why could that be? Yeah. So if the if it's due to malignancy, which is also metastasized to the liver, and there's like the hepatic dysfunction, then the liver itself is not able to synthesize those factors. Okay, yes. Okay, so if it's not able to synthesize those factors, even if you give vitamin K, nothing is going to happen. So in that case, you have to give fresh then you also have to give, yeah, blood transfusion if the patient is anemic. You have to give adequate hydration, and we avoid giving isotonic saline, 5 or 10% extras. Yes, okay. Then you have to prevent hepatic encephalopathy. So to prevent hepatic encephalopathy, what will we give? Yes, we give lactulose or oral neomycin. Okay. Then you want to prevent hepatorenal syndrome. Okay. So to prevent hepatorenal syndrome, what will you give? So hepatorenal syndrome occurs when malignancy, right? If there could be malignancy, like obstructive jaundice can also be because of, duodenal tumors, and there might be melena, so it might cause anemia. Yes, we give mannitol, very good. We give mannitol 100 to 200 ml BD to prevent hepatorenal syndrome. So mannitol keeps all the body fluids in the vascular system, and it prevents the kidney from getting underperfused. All right. Then vitamin K, FFP, blood transfusion, hydration, uh, lactulose, mannitol. Okay. Then you have to keep monitoring the PTINR. You have to keep monitoring the electrolytes to see if any renal failure is coming on. And then for prophylaxis, antibiotic prophylaxis, what antibiotic prophylaxis will you give? Pre-operative antibiotic. Hmm. What is this one? Like a No, yeah, we give third generation cefspel. Yeah. Okay, then so that we'll give that, and then we can give calcium supplements. Okay. So those are the pre-operative preparation that we'll do for a person with obstructive jaundice. All right. You might also do pre-operative decompression. If bilirubin is very high, if it's more than 12 milligram per cent, you might do pre-operative decompression. Means you relieve the obstruction to let some of the bile flow. Okay, yeah. Okay, we give cefotaxime. Okay, so you can do it through ERCP for surgery in case of like a malignant cause. So you can just relieve some of the jaundice, okay, and make the patient feel better. You can do a pre-operative decompression. All right. So these are the things we do pre-operatively. Now I'll just first tell, like in one line, what are the treatments in the important surgeries. Okay. So if the cause is due to CBD stones, if the cause is due to CBD stones, we do end ERCP. Where can we hear this? They'll upload it on YouTube after some time. They'll post a link here. Everybody's okay till now? What else? Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah. So for CBD stones, okay. Yeah. What do we do for treatment? First, we do stone removal. Okay. ERCP stone removal. See, now you just write it down. Okay. I'll explain how what after some time. Okay. So first, now we'll just writing this down. Okay. CBD stones, you do ERCP stone removal, comma. You can do choledochorlithotomy. Second, I'll just write this down. Choledochorlithotomy. Okay. You can do transduodenal thing. Yeah, Whipple procedure is not in here in Bilestones. Okay. Transduodenal sphincteroplasty. Transduodenal sphincteroplasty. Then you can do okay, choledochorjejunectomy, or I guess you can do that. It was not written in the book that I referred to. Choledochorduodenectomy. Okay, so ERCP stone removal, choledochorlithotomy, transduodenal sphincteroplasty, choledochorjejunostomy, and choledochorduodenostomy. Okay, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. Okay, this is like I'm just saying the things. Okay, stones. Okay, now next. ERCP stone. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. The next for carcinoma head of pancreas or periampullary carcinoma, as VCV said, we can do Whipple procedure. Okay. We can do triple bypass, or we can do ERCP stenting. Yeah. So for carcinoma head of pancreas or periampullary carcinoma, we can do Whipple procedure or triple bypass or ERCP stenting. Okay. These three things for carcinoma head of pancreas or periampullary carcinoma. Okay, next for biliary stricture. If biliary stricture is the cause of what is triple, I will tell what is triple bypass later. Now we're just writing it down. Okay. For biliary stricture, we can do stenting, or we can do choledochorjejunectomy. Okay, stenting. Did I write choledochorjejunectomy? Yeah. Stenting. We can do choledochorjejunectomy, or we can. Okay. We can do a Roux-en-Y. Hepatico. I'll explain what everything is. We're just writing it down right now, okay? Then I'll explain what everything is. Okay. So basically, suppose choledochorjejunectomy means creating a connection between jejunum and the bile duct, okay? And hepatico-jejunectomy means creating a connection between hepatic duct and jejunum, okay? Roughly, it's like that, okay? So this is for biliary stricture. We do stenting, choledochorjejunectomy, Roux-en-Y hepatico-jejunectomy, okay? Then for Klatskin tumor, we can do radical resection or palliative stenting. Radical resection or palliative stenting. In neonates, if there is obstructive jaundice, what is the most common cause of obstructive jaundice in neonates? If neonates have obstructive jaundice, what is the most likely cause? Does anybody know? Yeah, atresia. Biliary atresia, okay? Biliary atresia, okay? That is when are atrophic, like they're blocked. Okay, there's atresia of the bile duct. Okay, biliary atresia. So in that we do an operation that's called the Kasai's operation. Okay, Kasai's procedure. Kasai's procedure. All right. Okay. Okay. That you learn in peace. Okay. I'm not talking about that. Okay. And then if there is a choledochal cyst, that is the last cause. If there's a choledochal cyst, you can do excision of the cyst. You can do hepatico-jejunectomy or mucosal resection. So excision of the cyst for choledochal cyst. Okay, choledochal cyst. You do excision or hepatocystectomy, hepatocystectomy or mucosal resection. Okay, so these are like outline. This is the outline of the treatment of obstructive jaundice. Like if someone asks you what would you do in this, you can just say those names. But aren't there like 5 different types of what? Choledochal cyst. I don't know the type class. I don't study so much. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, okay. Post-operative management. Okay, so after the operation, okay, I'll go into details of the surgery after this. Okay, post-operative management. So for post-operative management, firstly, you have to monitor the PT-INR, bilirubin, albumin, creatinine, and electrolyte estimation to check for any coagulation defects, any renal failure. Okay, so you have to check prothrombin time, bilirubin, albumin, creatinine, and then if the PTINR is deranged, or if there is any infection, you can give FFP, you can give blood transfusion, you can give antibiotics. Okay, and then you have to observe for any septicemia, any hemorrhage, pneumonia, any pleural effusion or bile leak. And then if the cause is due, we place something called the T tube. Okay, the T tube inside. Okay, for stones. So we have to, and then we might place drains to check for any pancreatic leak or if any blood is collecting. So we take care of all those tubes and drains. And then, okay, then you just write it here. I'll explain this later. And then if you put in any, if you're giving TPN, if you put any CVP line or NG tube or urinary catheter, you take care of all that. Okay. And this T tube is removed after the operation. Yeah, that. Okay, I was gonna put a picture too. This T tube, you do a cholangiogram. Okay, cholangiogram through the T tube. 10 to 14 days post-op. Okay, 10 to 14 days post-op to see if any stones were left inside or if any obstruction is still there. And if everything is okay after 10 to 14 days, you can remove this T tube. All right. So that is the broad outline of pre-op, op, and post-op. But if it's not okay, then there are things that you have to do. Have I written that somewhere? Yeah, I have written that. I'll tell you. Okay. Yeah, mechanical flushing is one of those things. Okay. All right. So we'll move. Anybody has anything else you wanna talk about? Okay, guys, what is Charcot's triad? I think I talked about this in the last class, but in the video, I feel like I didn't focus on this much. I kind of just swept through it. What is Charcot's triad? Pain, jaundice, and fever. Okay, yes. And Charcot's triad is a triad of pain, abdominal pain, jaundice, and fever. And if all the three is present, we can say that if Charcot's triad is present, we can say that the patient has acute cholangitis. Okay. And what is Raynaud's pented? Yeah, what is that? What are the two things that you include in Raynaud's pented? Mental status changes and septic shock. Okay, so those three is present plus mental status change is present and shock is present, then it's Raynaud's pented. Okay. What are the common causes of acute cholangitis? Bacteria. What all bacteria you think can cause acute cholangitis? No one? E. coli, yes. Klebsiella, Streptococcus fecalis. Okay, E. coli, Klebsiella. Okay. So, yeah, that's all. Okay, so that's all I wanted to just touch on this. Yeah. Yeah, some worms can also cause obstructive jaundice. I don't know if they can cause cholangitis. Anyway. Okay, so so if a patient has obstructive jaundice due to stones, okay, stones obstructing the bile duct, then the treatment is based on whether or not they have cholangitis and the facilities that is available in your hospital. Okay, so if there is no cholangitis, if there is no infection, then so treatment you can divide into two: presence of cholangitis, absence of cholangitis. Okay, if there is absence of cholangitis, you can do laparoscopic cholecystectomy with CVD exploration. laparoscopic cholecystectomy with CBD's common bile duct, common bile duct exploration. Okay, laparoscopic cholecystectomy with CBD exploration, or in the same setting, you do laparoscopic cholecystectomy, you remove the gallbladder and remove any stones in the CBD. That is that. Okay, or you can do laparoscopic cholecystectomy, the same thing, with ERCP stone later. Okay, in two different settings. This is when there is no cholangitis, in the absence of cholangitis. Okay, if cholangitis is present, then the treatment of choice is ERCP, okay, with sphincterotomy, and stone extraction. Okay, so this is the treatment of choice. That is the second. That is like if you did ERCP and all, and then just you still see any residual stones, then you can do extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy. Okay, we'll come to that. It's not done primarily. Wait a second. Wait. So I know. I'm so sorry. So this is like we're putting the endoscope, okay, and this is called Dormia basket. Okay, we use this to catch the stones, okay, or Secura basket through the channel. Okay, so this is how ERCP stone removal works. All right. So that is the treatment of choice, ERCP with sphincterotomy with stone extraction. Okay, but if that doesn't work, then you can do percutaneous. See, we just usually use short forms. We'll call it ERCP and PPC and all. So then it becomes easier. Percutaneous transhepatic cholangiogram. Okay, so we can do PTC drainage. This is used in cases in which ERCP did not work, or you cannot do ERCP for any reason. Okay, and if both of these fail, ERCP and PTC drainage, then you can do surgical treatment. Okay, so surgical treatment also involves like putting a T tube in the CBD. Let's show the T tube thing. So yeah, I think bath had pores. So this is how we place it. Okay, and so this T tube drains any of the extra bile that is left. Okay. And then we remove it after some days. All right. So how do we remove the T? I mean, like, what do we do before removing the T tube? We clamp the T tube for 48 hours, and we see, okay, if we clamp the T tube and see if any symptoms are coming back again, if there's any obstruction, nothing happens, then we can remove the free T tube, or we and then cholangiogram that we do after 10 to 14 days, we basically inject the dye through this T tube and we see if it's freely flowing through the cholangiogram, which is basically like an X-ray, okay, to see any obstructive jaundice. If nothing is there, we can remove. But what if something is there? What if there is after surgery, after we've done all this, if there is retained CBD stones, then what do we do? So as someone said, the first thing we do is we flush the T. If the T tube is still intact, the T tube is still inside. Before we remove the T tube, we see that some stones. Then what do we do is that we inject heparinized saline or bile acid, okay, to flush, basically flush the obstruction away, dissolve the obstruction away, okay. Yeah, yeah, heparinized saline or bile acid flushing, okay. Then the second thing that we do is Verheyen technique. I don't think this is so important, but I think you just need to know what they do in this. In Verheyen technique, basically this T tube, no, we insert dilatators, we dilate the T tube, okay, So we dilate the T-tube and then we put a Dormier basket kind of thing through the T-tube and take the stone out. Okay, that is the Burheen technique. So basically we dilate the T-tube and take the stones out through the T-tube. We can do that, or if none of this works, we have to do again ERCP and stone removal after 3 weeks. Okay, so you can do, or if ERCP won't work, then we do reoperate the patient, or we can use, as VCV said, extracorporeal for kidney stones. We can use the same thing for bile stones. Extracorporeal shock, say, light. Okay, so heparinase saline, this Burheen ERCP stone removal after 3 weeks, or re-operate the patient, or extracorporeal shockwave lithotripsy. 5 things. Okay. So CBD stones treatment broadly is, if there is no cholangitis, you can do, and if you have laparoscopic stuff in your hospital, you can do laparoscopic cholecystectomy with CBD exploration, or you can do laparoscopic cholecystectomy and then an ERC. All right, so this is CBD stones. Okay, stones part is over. Does anybody have, everybody's understanding? Please put okay if you're understanding. I put this notes, so whatever terms feel like very weird to you, you guys can go through that terms again. Okay, but you have to understand the principles. Those are more important. Okay, what is happening in that thing? That is more important. Okay, all right. Okay, so now we'll go to the malignant. The most common malignant causes of obstructive jaundice are carcinoma head of pancreas and periampullary carcinoma. All right. So for some extra investigations that are of importance in case of these pancreatic, like carcinoma head of pancreas, you might find pancreatic enzymes also elevated, amylase, lipase. What is a tumor marker which you most commonly measure in case of carcinoma head of pancreas or pancreatic carcinoma? Yeah, but tumor marker. Yeah, CA 19-9. CA 19-9 will be elevated to more than 7. Okay, it will be elevated to more than 70 international units per liter, and this has a sensitivity of 70% and a specificity can also be elevated in other conditions. Okay, so CA 19-9, that's an important, CA 19-9, not 199, 19-9, okay, is an important tumor marker. Okay, then CPA can also be elevated. And there was this new tumor marker written in SRP called CA 494. Okay, CA 494, it helps to differentiate from chronic pancreatitis, apparently. I'm not sure how it does that, but I think it'll be elevated in, it'll also be elevated in pancreatic carcinoma. Helps to differentiate it from chronic pancreatitis. Okay, but CA 99 is the important one. All right. Okay. Okay, so next we come the most important thing when it comes to obstructive jaundice, treatment of obstructive jaundice. And one thing that they'll ask you if your case is a malignant cause of obstructive jaundice, and they might just ask you anyway, is Whipple's procedure. Okay, Whipple procedure. So it's mostly done in case of um, uh, carcinoma of head of pancreas. Okay, then so what all? So the first thing that we need to know what is basically what is Whipple's procedure. Radical pancreaticoduodenectomy. Okay, radical pancreaticoduodenectomy. Okay, this is the okay. Okay. Actually, before Whipple's procedure, or okay, we can talk about it now. So what all are the organs that we remove in? So basically, we are removing the, if the tumor is in the head of the pancreas, we want to remove that tumor, but we can't just remove the. We have to remove other things also along with the head of pancreas. All right. So 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 guys, write down what are the organs. They'll ask you in Viva what are the organs that we remove in head of in Whipple's procedure. All right. So what are the organs? The first thing is the head of the pancreas. Okay, the head of the pancreas. All right. And then the second is the head and neck of the okay, I'm going to write this down. Okay, I'm going to say this properly. I mean, I might just type it. Head and neck of pancreas, including the uncinate process. Uncinate process. That is head and neck of pancreas, including the uncinate process. Then we remove the whole of the duodenum. The entire duodenum goes, and 10 centimeter of proximal jejunum. Proximal jejunum. Okay. Then we remove the distal 40 to 50% of the stomach. Then we remove a portion that is gone. Okay. Then we remove the gallbladder. And then move the lower end of the CBD. Some part of the CBD also goes lower end of the CBD. That CBD is common bile duct. And then we remove a bunch of lymph nodes, periduodenal. So they'll ask you this in Viva. What are the stuff that you remove in with this procedure? So you should know this. Okay, peripancreatic lymph nodes and periduodenal. Okay, so these are the things that are removed in Whipple's procedure. They're kind of removed all together as a ma, like this. Okay, now once we have removed all these things, okay, you see like the pancreas, the bile duct, the duodenum, okay, whatever is to the left of the SMV, all of that is being removed. Okay, whatever is not left, where is it left? Right to the SMV. Is it right or left? I don't know. One side of the SMV is removed and the other side is not removed. Okay, then right, okay. I'm really bad at directions. Okay, so that is done. Okay. Okay, so then we have to, so now we know that what all we have removed. Okay, so that is done. Now we have to stitch stuff back together so that the food can pass properly and the food is able to digest. So we stitch stuff back together. So what are the things what is the connections that we make in Whipple's procedure? So the first connection that we make is first connection that we make is pancreatico-jejunostomy. Okay, pancreatico-jejunostomy. Then we do choledochojejunostomy. Okay, and we do gastrojejunostomy. Gastrojejunostomy. I'm just gonna post the same picture again. Okay. Yeah. You are able to see this the pancreas, whatever is left of the pancreas, it's sewed back to the jejunum. Okay, so that is number 2 is pancreatico. Okay, there is an end to side anastomosis, which means end is the end of the pancreas and side is the side of the jejunum. Okay, end to side anastomosis. You cannot hear. Are people able to hear? Hello? Is it audible? Is it clear? Are you able to hear clearly? Okay. Bath, are you able to hear? I mean, not Bath. Shaktiman, are you able to hear? Bath, are you able to hear? Where did he go now? Not typing. Parkinson's, yes. Okay. All right. So you see that the end of the pancreas. Okay, let's finish the class soon. Okay. Yeah. Are you able to hear? Oh, he won't hear me saying, "Are you able to hear?" Then I think it's your problem because other people are able to hear. Okay. I'll continue though, because I think it's almost an hour. Let's finish the class soon. Okay, everyone, go back to the picture, please. Okay. Okay, everyone, please pay attention. It's very important. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we see this pancreas end is anastomosed to the side of the jejunum. Okay, so there's an end to side anastomosis of the pancreas. That is the number 2, pancreaticojejunostomy. Okay, then we do a what is it? Choledochojejunostomy. Okay, choledocho means the bile duct. The bile duct is sued to the jejunum. Okay, again an end to side anastomosis, choledochojejunostomy. Okay, and then we do a gastrojejunostomy. One part of the stomach is sued to the jejunum, gastrojejunostomy. Okay, so the 3 things: pancreaticojejunostomy, choledochojejunostomy, and what was it? Gastrojejunostomy. Okay, so now there are some variations to different cases. Okay, so I'll talk about those. Before talking about that, I'll talk about the complications of Whipple procedure. Okay, they might ask you what are the complications of Whipple's procedure. The one most common complication of the Whipple's procedure is delayed gastric emptying. Okay, delayed gastric emptying. Basically, the food just tends to, all these connections that you made in the jejunum. You have done a pancreaticojejunostomy or duodenojejunostomy. Like the food just tends to get logged over there. It doesn't go down. So that is delayed gastric emptying. The next thing is leak because of a pancreatic fistula. Like you're trying to sew a organ like pancreas, which is so soft, to a jejunum. You have to make very small sutures. Sometimes you might not be able to seal it properly. So there might be a pancreatic fistula, which can cause the leak. Okay, now because of all of this, and it's such a big procedure, it takes 6 hours to complete, and there's so much things going on over here, it can cause infection. Okay, it can cause infection. It can be an intra-abdominal abscess, wound infection, cholangitis, pancreatitis. All of these can happen, and then there can also be bile leak. Okay, because of it's not sewed up properly, so some bile is leaking from the connections. So these are the complications: delayed gastric emptying, pancreatic fistula, infection, and bile leak. All right. So these are the complications of the Whipple's procedure. It's the duodenum, yeah, it's gone. Okay, yeah, the duodenum is gone. So I guess whatever complications come with that also might come. All right. Okay, so we have some variations to the Whipple's procedure. There is a thing called pylorus. Yeah, pylorus preserving pancreaticoduodenectomy. Pylorus preserving pancreaticoduodenectomy. Okay. Pancreatic preserving done. So basically in this, what we do is we don't remove the pylorus, and it's also called, it's another name for this is called transverse Longmire procedure. Transverse. You don't need to know. So I mean, if you are very serious, you can know all of these names, but you should know what is happening. Okay. So what we do is we preserve the gastric antrum, we preserve the pylorus, and we preserve a small portion of the duodenum. Okay. We preserve the gastric antrum. Didn't say there is. Whoa. I don't know, Discord is censoring some of my pictures for explicit content. Okay. You see, they cut off the pylorus, I mean, the gastric antrum, the pylorus, and a small portion of the duodenum is preserved. Okay. And then they cut everything else off. Okay. Yeah, but then I'm screenshotting and posting. I think that is working. So, okay. So this is how pylorus preserving pancreaticoduodenectomy works. So this helps because it is a more physiological procedure, like more physiological. So it helps in gastric emptying. Okay. Um, yeah, that is basically it. Okay, for pancreaticoduodenectomy. All right. Then what else? Okay, now in some cases of carcinoma head of pancreas, if along with the head of pancreas, some body is also involved. Some body of the pancreas is also involved. Some people do a total pancreatectomy. Okay, because if there is multicentric disease, like if you did imaging and you found that there were like malignant lesions in multiple focus of malignant lesions in the pancreas, then if it's a multifocal disease, if you think there'll be an increased chance of recurrence, okay, so you do a total pancreatectomy. Okay, total pancreatectomy might have more mortality, and it might might lead to severe diabetes in the patient because of complete lack of insulin. But it's better if you, like severe diabetes will be there. So, but if you think like if the tumor is big and if it's extending into the body, you'd rather just remove everything. So you do a total pancreatectomy. Now there is this sometimes if the tumor, there's something called a resectable tumor and an operable tumor. Okay, resectable and operable. This is the last thing, guys. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going above 1 hour, but this is the last thing and it'll be over. Okay, resectable and operable tumor. So what is the difference between resectable and operable? Resectable means that we can successfully remove the tumor. Okay, the tumor will be gone. Okay, but in the tumor free for the most part, whatever we can see. Okay, and operable tumor means that the tumor has metastasized to some extent. It has spread locally and will not be able to completely remove the tumor. But if we do the operation, the patient can at least survive the operation procedure that we have planned, whether we think is necessary for this patient. Whatever this operation that we're doing, the patient will be able to survive it. So what is inoperable tumor? Inoperable tumor is that the disease has spread so much, okay, that even if you do operate, the patient will not be able to survive that operation. So that is inoperable tumor. And okay, so resectable and operable are two different things. When you resect, you remove the tumor completely. When you say the patient is not resectable but operable, means you won't be able to remove the tumor, but you will be able to remove enough things that are necessary for the patient to have a good quality of life. Okay, that is operable tumor. All right, inoperable tumor is when it is so the malignancy has spread so much that you cannot operate. So you will be asked in Viva what is the criteria for a resectable tumor and what is the criteria for an inoperable tumor. Okay, so first let's write down the criteria for resectable tumor. Okay, did I miss any pictures? No. Okay, so criteria for resectable tumor to pancreas. Okay, tumor should be localized to pancreas. Okay, localized to pancreas, that's the first thing. The second thing is there should be no evidence of criteria for resectable tumor. Okay, criteria for resectable tumor. Okay, so the first thing is localized to pancreas. Okay, then there should be no SMV, superior mesenteric vein, or portal vein involvement. I don't know why it's all in caps. It doesn't matter. No SMV and portal vein involvement. Okay, so third one is there should be a preserved fat plane, between the tumor and the SMA, between the tumor and SMA and celiac plexus branches. Basically, it should not be, impinging onto nearby structures. It should only be in the pancreas. And no evidence of distant metastasis. No evidence of distant. Okay. Okay. This was given in Makhanlal Saha and SRB. They've actually given a smaller criteria. They just said tumor less than 3 centimeter, periampulate tumor, and growth not adherent to portal system. I think it's like the same thing, both of them. So you can a periampulate tumor and growth not adherent to portal system. Okay, so this is the criteria for resectable tumor, which means it has not gone into nearby places and you can remove the tumor completely easily. Okay, then we have criteria for inoperability. Criteria for inoperability. Okay, inoperability. So for that, first thing is basically if the tumor has metastasized. Okay, so if there is any ascites, if there is any peritoneal mets, if there are multiple liver mets, if there is extensive lymph node mets, if there is invasion of growth to IVC, okay, invasion of growth to if it also invasion of growth to superior mesenteric vein or portal vein or celiac axis. Basically, if it invades nearby or other places, and metastasis to far off places, then it's inoperable. Okay. So if it's inoperable, then what do? How can you make the patient feel better? Okay. Actually, first before that, okay, if it's not resectable, but if it's okay, if it's not resectable, but if it's operable, we do this thing called triple bypass surgery, which VC was talking about, triple bypass surgery. Okay. Basically, what we do in triple bypass surgery is it's a palliative surgery. There's a difference between Whipple surgery and triple bypass. So Whipple surgery, we do it with curative content. We're trying to remove the tumor, but to make the patient feel better, to alleviate his symptoms, to alleviate his jaundice, to alleviate his gastric outlet obstruction. So this is why we do triple bypass surgery. So what do we do in triple bypass surgery? We make 3 connections. Okay, what are the 3 connections? We do a gastrojejunostomy. Gastrojejunostomy, the connection between stomach and jejunum. Okay, so we do this if there is any gastric outlet obstruction in the duodenum. To bypass that obstruction, we do a gastrojejunostomy. Okay, maybe I should post a picture. I think it's this. So there's a gastrojejunostomy. Okay, you see this? Then you can either do a cholecysto or a choledocho. So here they've done a cholecystojejunostomy. They've connected the gallbladder and the jejunum. Okay, but you can also do a choledochojejunostomy. I'll post that picture too. These pictures are from SRB only. Okay, not from some random place. Okay, and okay, so here you can see they've made a connection between the CBD. You see that CBD and okay, so that over there students choledochojejunostomy. So CBD bile duct and the jejunum, they made a connection between those two. That's a choledochojejunostomy. Okay, gastrojejunostomy. So gastrojejunostomy, we do that to relieve gastric outlet obstruction. Choledochojejunostomy, we do that to relieve bile obstruction, so that the jaundice gets relieved, the pruritus gets relieved. Okay, so the patient feels better. And then we do a jejunostomy over here, JJ. Okay, we do this because if we didn't do that, right, some food might just get stuck in the in that duodenum region. Okay, and it might just not pass through. All right, so to help the food to pass through quickly, to prevent delayed gastric emptying, we do jejunostomy. Okay, all right. So this is triple bypass surgery. All right. Okay. And see, in the second picture, can you see there is like from choledochojejunostomy to duodenojejunostomy? It's called like a Roux-en-Y anastomosis. Roux-en-Y anastomosis. Okay. So what does Roux-en-Y mean? Okay. So Roux is the name of the scientist who, or a surgeon, I think, I don't know, the name of the guy. Okay, who I think thought about this procedure. N means end to side. So one end, like in one end of the jejunum or one end of one of the organ is anastomosed with the side of the organ, and it's Y. It looks like a Y. Like C, from CDJ to JJ, there is one loop, one arc of the Y. From gastrojejunum to jejunojejunum, there's the other end of the Y, and then it goes down. So it looks like a Y. Okay, so that's called Roux-en-Y anastomosis. Okay. People got this. This is the hard part to understand. Like our professors, when they took classes for obstructive jaundice, this is what they spent the most time explaining to us, because we never understood. Like it's hard to understand. No, so when they remove this, like see for Roux-en-Y, you cut a portion of jejunum, you take it up, you sew it to this. So when you do this, you make sure that the direction they are maintaining is in the flow of the peristaltic waves, like sync peristaltic waves, so that it doesn't get screwed up. So when they do the surgery, they make sure the intestines are aligned in that way. Okay, so that the peristaltic wave direction does not get screwed up. All right. But then I'm not teaching it because it's very confusing. Like you can read about Roux-en-Y anastomosis, and that there'll be some terms mentioned, how it's done, the steps of the surgery, like syn peristaltic intestine and all. So like they take care of that. Okay. So this is triple bypass surgery. Okay, so Whipple's procedure and triple bypass surgery are different things. Okay. So then, okay, and I'm gonna finish it in 10 minutes. Okay, not more than that. So I talked about criteria for inoperability, right? Yeah. Okay, so if we cannot operate it also, then what do? We just do palliative surgery. Okay. Actually, triple bypass is also palliative. Okay. So if you want to relieve the jaundice, you can do endoscopic stenting. Endoscopic stenting of the bile duct. So we just do endoscopic stenting. We remove the obstruction. Because of the obstruction, the flow of bile is able to flow, and so the jaundice gets reduced. So the patient feels better. The pruritus jaundice comes down. Okay, so that helps. Okay. Then you can also do like other stuff like colodocojejunostomy, cholecystogenostomy, colodocoduodenostomy. Okay, like this triple bypass thing. Okay, and for gastric outlet obstruction, also you can do endoscopic stenting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of hard to imagine. Like I think in final year, all the classes that I had, like they would explain blue and white through like stethoscopes and stuff, and it's hard to understand all of those things. Okay. Then, so relief of jaundice through stenting or through any surgery, cholecystogenostomy, cholecystogenostomy. Then relief of gastric outlet obstruction. Again, you can do it through stenting. Yeah, and through stenting. That is short term. So this stenting is short term relief. It might just get obstructed again. You might just have to do stenting again. Okay. Then if you can do surgery, you do gastrojejenostomy through this triple bypass. Then you can relieve pain. We know that pancreatic carcinomas are very painful. So you can give analgesics such as NSAIDs, opioids. And then if patient has pruritus, if it is mild pruritus, you can give emollients to moisturize the skin. Or if it's moderate to severe, then you can give bile acid resins such as cholestyramine, rifampin, or you can give opioid antagonists or ursodeoxycholic acid. Okay. I'll post the notes. I think I'm just not going to type now. I'll just post the notes. Okay. So, and if all these surgeries and all don't work, or the patient is not fit for surgery and you can't do like all of this, you can also do chemotherapy. All right. So, yeah, that is it for around 15 minutes. That's all about management and investigations. I'll post my notes, and if you guys want to know more about Whipples and triple bypass, like how it's how it's done, you guys can like read the steps of the surgery, or you can watch videos. Like there are good videos also of Whipples in on YouTube. Okay, so that's it. Does anybody have? You can just give me a cookie, Bhalu. That'll do. If you guys want me to, like, I'm kind of free now because I don't have classes or tests. I'm just applying for residency. Like, I think triple bypass is, I think operable means that you're also touching the tumor. But in triple bypass, you don't touch the tumor. You just, I think it's kind of palliative also. You can also do it for inoperable because you're not touching the tumor. Uh, you're just relieving the symptoms. What is the difference in endoscopy and laparoscopy? So endoscopy is done through the mouth. You put an endoscope through the mouth. Okay. Laparoscopy is done. I thought I took a picture of laparoscopy also. Okay, laparoscopy is you inject a I mean not inject. You put a laparoscope through the abdomen. You make a hole in the abdomen and put a tube through the abdomen, and then you do the surgery. So the benefit of laparoscope is you're not opening up the whole abdomen. You're opening up, making a small holes. You're making small holes. Then you inject a camera probe. You inject a in surgical instruments probe, and you do the operation through the laparoscope. Okay. Thanks for the cookies, guys. Both are investigating. No, laparoscope is not for investigating. Laparoscopic cholecystectomy I mentioned for treatment, right? So if you want to treat, if you want to remove the PBD stones, you want to do cholecystectomy and remove the stones, you can do it laparoscopically instead of doing an open surgery. Okay, so you can do it that. Endoscopy is part of the ERCP thing. So ERCP, you can use, like previously ERCP was used as an investigation to diagnose CBD stones. But now we also have MRCPs, and MRCP, you just it's just like MRI, so it's better than endoscopy. It's not invasive. Okay, so we prefer MRCP to ERCP. for investigation. So now ERCP is predominantly used for treatment. If a hospital does not have laparoscopic instruments, they use ERCP, okay, with stenting and with sphincterotomy to remove the stones. But if they have laparoscopic instruments, they can use laparoscopy. They prefer to use laparoscopy. That's the thing. All right. Okay. So I guess I'll switch off my mic now. Anybody has any other doubts? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening.